Well, hi, everybody. Meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Welcome to the Joe Chaffee Weather Show on this Friday night, the 18th of Friday night, the 18th of October, 2019. It's 7:03 Eastern Time. I kind of did a little bit of rearranging, so I just sort of reversed. I think the lighting is a little better on this side of the screen than on the other side of the screen. And this will allow me to do some quick at-the-top reminders. So if you haven't downloaded the Meteorologist Joe Chaffee Weather app, it's free. So do download it for Android or for iPhones. It'll default to your location so you can get your local forecast, current conditions. And for those of you that are in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Long Island area, there's a new separate tab for Long Island. Plus, you can watch the live streams or the replays of the live streams right here, right on the app. And also, while you're on Google Play, make sure you download Angry Ben's app, the Angry Weatherman, which is also free. So you have mine, you have his, and your weather world is fulfilled. And in the on the other side of the equation, straight up that way, for those of you who are looking for an even more in-depth weather experience, or perhaps weather is important to your day-to-day operations and making decisions and so on, join my weather platform on Patreon. It's patreon.com/meteorologist Joe Chaffee. That's a subscription platform, but it's just $2 a month, and it goes a long way at $2 to support all the stuff that I'm doing. And higher tiers are available for those of you who need more one-on-one hand-holding. Okay, so let's get started tonight. We've got a lot happening with a new tropical storm Nestor, and somewhere along the line, where's my window? Tell me I lost my window. Hold on a second. In all that rearranging, I seem to have, there we go. Okay, I just shrunk it, that's all. So we've got Tropical Storm Nestor in the Gulf of Mexico, and I think when you look at it, it obviously doesn't have that classical look of a tropical storm, but I'm guessing the Hurricane Center, with what they saw this afternoon with the reconnaissance aircraft reports, they checked off all the boxes in terms of a criteria for a tropical storm, and they checked enough boxes and they were upgraded. I think it also, from a practical standpoint, if you're talking about a potential tropical cyclone, and you're seeing winds of 50 to 60 miles an hour being reported by Air Force reconnaissance aircraft, and you're still referencing it as a potential cyclone, I understand that. You understand that. If those of you, you're all weather savvy. My audience is very weather savvy. But those that are less weather savvy are going to be a little bit confused. And perhaps the message of for example, of a storm surge. And one of the things that may happen here is that there may be actually a sizable surge because of the fact that this thing is moving to the northeast at over 20 miles an hour and pushing all that water up into the northeastern part of the Gulf of Mexico along the northwest coast of Florida. So you might have a surge potential there that's higher than it otherwise would be in a situation like this. So it's probably was the smart thing to go ahead and upgrade it. And it looks far better than Tropical Storm Karen ever did in its life cycle. So if you'd have made that a tropical storm, you certainly should make this one a tropical storm. Now, there will be some upside here. The upside is for the southeast, for the Carolinas, for into Virginia, where the rainfall has been lacking for quite a while, particularly in the southern part of that area, and also back through Georgia and through a portion of southern Alabama. So at least from that standpoint, the very dry conditions that exist in those areas are going to get alleviated to some degree with this particular system. It's going to move inland. It's going to become extra tropical, but it will maintain a solid identity as it moves through the southeastern part of the U.S. I think it's going to go up through the Carolinas, and it's going to get to southeastern Virginia, and then just kind of shoot out more east-northeast. And Patreon members, I put up a post this afternoon explaining why that was going to be the case, and we're going to go over that in just a little bit. We have the weekend forecast We have an active pattern next week. Remember, as in weather, when you get into these weather pattern, the certain weather pattern, things don't happen, usually don't repeat exactly, but there is a similarity to them. They do tend to rhyme, and we have a couple of systems ahead that have a bit of a rhyming nature to what just happened here on Wednesday into Thursday with the big storm up in New England. It's not going to play out, though, exactly the same way, nor is it going to play out in terms of the ferociousness and veracity that we saw with the system from Wednesday into Thursday. So we're going to start. I want to start with tonight's water vapor imagery when we look at what's going on with Nestor. No, that's not going to be good. Hang on, folks. I may have a problem here. Hang on one second. Let's see what's going on. Hold it. This is really weird. I am having this is my own fault. I should never have done what I did, which was to move my windows around. I'm cursed. All right, hang on. I'm going to have to figure this out. Nope, this is the wrong one. Boy, we're getting this Friday night show off to a good start, aren't we? I think I'm just going to start this from scratch, so let's try that. Hang on. Just want to make sure. There it is. Okay. So, let's start with the rain. All right? Forgive me for the technical errors here. We have WPC's rainfall forecast for the next 7 days, and some of this is from, of course, Tropical Storm Nestor, and you see that the rain amounts are pretty solid here. There's also going to be 2 additional weather systems for the week ahead, so when you combine it all, you're seeing some rather healthy rainfall amounts from East Texas through the Carolinas. We're talking about several to 6 inches of rain, or even more, like you see along the Florida Panhandle there, during the next 7-day period. Also, seeing a fair amount of rain on the order of maybe 1 inch to 1.5 inches throughout the northern mid-Atlantic into New England, although there are a few pockets here where you've got the rainfall amounts under 3/4 of an inch in northern Virginia, Maryland, and to southern New Jersey. And then it picks up again up in northern parts of Minnesota and over to the east across northern Lake Superior. Also pretty active in the northern Rockies, and some of that is going to be in the form of snow, actually more than some of that in some areas. And up in the northwest in Washington and into northwestern Oregon, where we're seeing some ample rainfall amounts being indicated by WPC. If you look at where the rain is here on this map, in terms of how it shapes in the east, if you look at that trail of the 2 to 3 inches that runs from off North Carolina east-northeastward, that is where WPC is suggesting that the extratropical low that comes out of Tropical Storm Nestor will be taking that particular track. South and east of New Jersey and Long Island and southern and southeastern New England. I think the big question is how far. The clouds are certainly going to get in the picture for Sunday in the area from eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England. I think the big question is how far north does the northern extent of the rain get, and it might get into southern New Jersey, it might get into Long Island and southernmost New England for a short time. And we're not talking about anything substantial here, but that would be, that's the risk, I think, for Sunday afternoon and evening. Saturday, definitely the better of the 2 weekend days. Now we can go to the water vapor imagery, and we can see what's happening here in terms of the upper air. And Robert Brown, I know you asked me this question on Patreon today, and the Post addressed it with regards to why is this not going to be turning up the eastern seaboard. And we're going to set the table here with this map, with this loop. the water vapor imagery at high levels, and there's a lot. These water vapor imageries are really useful. I'm glad I started using them again to figure out what's happening, because they are really helpful from a forecast standpoint. Now, I've backed the loop up a bit. In fact, I'm going to back it up just a little bit more. I want to add a few extra frames here. Let's go to 120 frames, which will take us back to overnight and early this morning. And this really shows pretty well what's happening with respect to this tropical system in terms of its evolution. When we start at the beginning, right in here, you can definitely see that twist. That is an upper air, a small shortwave upper air low that's moving eastward. It's distinctly separate from the area that is Tropical Storm Nestor. But watch as we get toward the end of this loop, you're going to notice that upper air shortwave and the area that is Nestor are kind of combining here. So we're getting non-tropical energy, what's called baroclinic energy, that's taking over and forcing the surface system that represents Nestor to strengthen. And that's what happened this afternoon. The upper air winds here are pretty strong. If you look at the flow, you can see clouds rushing up from southwest to northeast, but the presence of this strong shortwave is causing this storm to deepen or intensify in a way that non-tropical storms do. So it's compensating for that strong shear. Otherwise, you'd get this whole thing would get ripped apart, and there really wouldn't be much to it. All of this is being driven eastward because if you look back out to the west, you can see another trough right in here that is moving eastward and kind of forcing the flow along. The moisture field is moving west to east across Texas. And then, of course, in the east, you have the old trough from the major storm that is starting to slowly but surely pull out. It's right up here. There's an upper low that's up in eastern Canada that is moving away. So this trough is moving eastward, and there's a bit of a ridge in between. So if you want to draw the overall scheme of the upper flow, it's kind of like this. And at the moment, the system that is the upper low that's it's sort of separated a little bit right in here like that, and that is moving eastward for now, and we're going to see that start to turn more northeastward. This is going to pull all of this and move it straight up northeast into Georgia, because as the system in the east pulls out, the flow here is going to turn more southwesterly. It is only going to be able to get so far north before it kind of deflects out, and the reason for that is that, and you'll see this when we do look at the upper air on the weather models, is that it kind of needs some energy from this trough that's back through here. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, areas that need rain would probably like to see this come up. Areas that don't probably won't. But what you are going to see is a shortwave trough that is going to try to connect with this in order to drive it more northeastward up the coast. But it's not going to be able to accomplish that. They're going to stay separate. And as a result, you're going to wind up seeing Nestor eventually getting deflected out more to the east once it reaches North Carolina, southeastern Virginia. And again, at this point, because it's going to look this will be on Sunday, it's going to look so much like a non-tropical system at this point. You'll have a rain shield on the northwest side, and you're going to have to wait to see the extent of how far north and west that rain shield gets. And we're not really talking about a whole lot of rain for my area. Now here's the visible from this afternoon and into this evening, and we've got enough frames here so we can see it just before sunset. And you can pick out that it's still on the broad side, but there's a low-level center right in there, and you're seeing a little bit of convective activity that's developing around it. So again, there was enough here for the Hurricane Center to upgrade it. It also, it's kind of stretched out. The center actually is sort of elongated in a northeast-southwest direction. So, and it's the upper low, it's that short wave, the upper low that's doing that, causing it to be stretched out rather than getting it into a very tight, concentric, low-level circulation center. So on the radar tonight, it's pretty loaded, and you'll notice, by the way, that there's a lot of rain that extends down around the Florida Big Bend, going to Tampa, and as far south as Sarasota and Fort Myers. So you're seeing rain sweeping in from off the Gulf of Mexico, well to the east and also to the north and northwest of the center. The radar doesn't go far enough south and west, but there's probably some more echoes off the range of the radars. The northern extent of that rain now moving into southernmost Alabama and just about getting ready to cross the Florida-Georgia border. And if you notice, it has an overrunning look to it, okay? Much like you would see ahead of a warm front, as opposed to seeing bands of heavy precip inside areas of much lighter precip or some gaps in between. It does have much more of an overrunning look to it. And again, this goes to the nature of the fact that this system is probably not completely tropical in nature. The radars will go locally, will take you around. These radars, by the way, and of course the satellite loops, we're at 7:20 Eastern time, so if you're watching from the Gulf Coast and you're watching this on a replay, just bear that in mind and go to weather.gov to get your latest weather information if you're seeing this overnight, or you might even be watching this tomorrow morning. But as of 7:19 Friday night Eastern time, you're seeing that rain, even a little bit of rain touching parts of southeast Louisiana, but pulling away, and a little bit around Mobile. That seems to be drying up a little bit, and it starts to pick up as you head eastward toward Pensacola. Now the Tallahassee radar showing more rain toward Panama City, which is, I think, about where this thing is going to make landfall, somewhere in there, the center, and rain just outside of Tallahassee and lifting up to the northeast, again, right at the moment approaching the border of Georgia and Florida. And we'll run down to the Tampa Bay radar, and this is where we're seeing also some severe thunderstorm warnings that are popping up, some special marine warnings, I should say, that are popping up over the coastal waters. So much of the energy in this is being spent out east of the low center. You can almost envision, if it looks like a warm front, this is kind of where the warm sector would be. So you're getting some heavier rains coming in north of Sarasota and up toward Tampa. There's also a few bands now coming in near Port Charlotte and down and over just to the west of Fort Myers and Naples, and also near Punta Gorda. So this is all lifting up to the northeast. So pretty active radars indeed. There's your Hurricane Center forecast, which really hasn't changed very much. Bringing it inland tomorrow morning. They have it as a post-tropical system by 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, but still maintaining tropical storm strength as it runs up from there to west of Charleston to near Hatteras by Sunday afternoon, 1 o'clock, and then going east-northeast from there, sitting well southeast of Long Island by 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Monday. I think what you're going to wind up seeing is once it gets out here, it may just sort of, you're going to see the system basically start to really weaken and fall apart while it's offshore. The actual frame of this system, the low and the isobars around it are going to be intact, but at this point, you probably will wind up with very little in terms of precip with it when it gets out into Monday afternoon. It may just meander around and wait for the next trough coming in from the west to pick it up. So here's the upper air for the GFS as it loads. And I'm going to clear out some of these loops here so that my system works a bit better. So give me 1 second here. And okay, so that can go. So here is the upper air for tonight. And we have our, here's that upper low that I was telling you about, that you saw in the water vapor imagery, and it's kind of captured. What you see here, the second circle, that represents Nestor, just kind of being captured by this upper low. Here's your trough out in the west, and you still have more energy coming in off the west coast and moving in toward the Rockies. Your east coast trough that is getting out of the way, and this ridge that is built up in the middle. So I'm just going to I want to outline this a little bit for you so you can see how it changes before I start moving it. So here's a basic outline of the jet stream this evening. And of course we got to draw the southern part of this to represent the southern system. All right, so before I set things in motion, I just want to set the table up for you. The East Coast trough is going to start lifting out. The West Coast energy is going to start moving eastward, this trough. And of course, you've got the upper low in the Gulf states that's going to be kicked eastward. But watch what happens here. So it's trying to turn northeastward, and it's doing it because the trough that's out in the Rockies starts to lift up, and it looks as if it's connecting, and that it's going to pick this up and try to take it, instead of taking it northeast along the coast, maybe taking it northeast. But watch what happens as we move through Saturday night and Sunday. The northern part of that trough just lifts up and weakens. There's not much of it left. You can see how it is right now, and how the upper air is going to change. The new energy coming into the west digs an upper low in Wyoming and into Nebraska. That's going to be the main trough that comes out of here. So this lead trough kind of weakens and falls apart, and it never really is able to pick it up and connect with it. So now that lead trough is somewhere up here. Here's what's left of the upper feature that is driving Nestor. So now it's just kind of moving along as the ridge weakens along the east coast, and it's going to try to move northeast, but it's just going to have a real tough time doing it, and it may go from here. It's just going to get ejected out to the east as this energy here starts to really intensify into the next major system, and you can see it right there. By the time we get to Sunday night and Monday, you've got an upper high building sitting right over South Florida, and that's in response to this new really deep trough that is forming in the northern plains and extending down into Texas. So Nestor is lingering somewhere out here off the mid-Atlantic coastline, and it's hard to even find a good solid kink in the flow that would represent that particular shortwave. So if you just remember from the water vapor imagery what we started with, well-defined shortwaves. You can see the swirl very distinct there on the water vapor imagery. It kind of gets lost as we move off the coast. And then as we move through next week, this deep trough is going to head for the western lakes. The system we just had, there are similarities in terms of the overall look, and I can illustrate. I'll illustrate that by going back to a couple of days ago when you had the strengthening trough in the east. I mean, it's not 100%, but there are some similarities to it in terms of the overall flavor of the pattern. But in the system from earlier from a few days ago, here's your trough, here's your upper low, and you've got the trough. Remember, it went negative as it lifted up toward the northeast. The new trough sets up similar but further to the west. Okay, so now when we go into Tuesday and Wednesday, you've got an upper low that's up in the western lakes with a negatively tilted trough that is lifting up through the Ohio Valley and on up into western New York. So we're not going to have another ferocious coastal low. There will be a secondary development here but the main trough action is further to the west, so we're going to get less in terms of impact and in terms of secondary development with the next front as it goes on through, and then that lifts up, that arm lifts up and out. We get a break for a day or two, and then we've got more energy that's going to be coming in for the end of next week and into next weekend. So the pattern remains as a whole. The pattern remains very active going forward, and it will continue probably right through the end of the month and maybe even into the beginning of the month of November. So let's check out the short range and see what's going on with. We'll go to the surface map and watch all of this play out. Starting with, of course, you've got Nestor in the northeast, in the northeastern Gulf. This is for this evening. High pressure is building in and finally seeing the gradient relaxing in the mid-Atlantic states and in the southern areas of the Northeast. Still a little bit breezy as you head up into northern New England, but the gradient's going to relax there as well. And tomorrow, no problem, but you see the low moves inland over the Florida Panhandle tomorrow morning near Panama City. Still maintaining a pressure right around 1,000 millibars or just under 1,000 millibars. There actually might be some gusty winds across parts of Georgia into South Carolina tomorrow as the low moves inland. There's maybe some wind gusts in there because it is interacting with a high to the north, so there's still a little bit of a gradient there. Nothing crazy. While that's moving in, and of course you've got all this new energy coming into the west, you can see that there's snow being generated in Washington and Oregon, into Idaho, and eventually going into the northern Rockies. No big snowstorm here, but there might be some decent snowfall amounts for snow lovers in some of the higher elevations in the northern Rockies. Although when you look at it, every place in the northern Rockies is a high elevation. But there's your low along the East Coast, whatever the post-tropical version of Nestor, spreading that rain through Georgia, south and North Carolina, into southern Virginia. And here's where you start to see that slide to the east. Now, the northern fringe of this is just very light rain. I don't know how much of that is actually reaching the ground. If we look at it from the standpoint, here on this map, we're looking at it from the standpoint of actual measurable precipitation. If we look at it from the standpoint of what it thinks it sees on the radar, you can see where the northern fringe of this is, runs up off the North Carolina coast. You get that area of rain over the Delmarva Peninsula. This is Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock over New Jersey, Long Island, and into Connecticut and the Hudson Valley. I don't know. It might be a little bit too far north. I just don't think it's anything really to get worked up about. Except for the fact that it may rain in some areas during the day, but by evening time, much of the rain is done. So you would think that this would say this is the radar Sunday morning at 8 a.m., 2 p.m., and then sometime after 1 or 2 o'clock, the rain ends just about everywhere as the low moves out, assuming it gets that far north. And meanwhile, you can see the low that comes out of the Rockies with its broken area of snow and a little bit of rain into the northern plains. That's going to swing eastward. And we should point out that with this next system coming out of the plains and heading up toward the western lakes, the trailing cold front is likely to produce perhaps some severe weather. The Storm Prediction Center on its Day 4 outlook has a slight risk of severe for parts of Arkansas, northern Louisiana, into northwest Mississippi, into western Tennessee. So, and I wouldn't be at all shocked that would be the case, because you do have this low that's going to deepen as it heads northeastward, and you've got this strong trailing cold front that goes all the way down into Texas and pushing eastward as well. And there you go for Monday afternoon into Monday night. So that kind of makes sense to me that we could have a little bit of a late season severe weather outbreak. In the east, things calm down on Monday. You've got a bit of a reprieve here. There's weak high pressure that builds in between the old low offshore, which is still meandering there, and the next front that is just passing the Mississippi River and heading for Chicago by Monday afternoon. And then as we move into Monday night and on Tuesday, you're going to start to see that rain shower activity swing into the northeast. I think that this may be a bit underdone. You'll also notice, by the way, the old low of Nestor southeast of Cape Cod. When I said earlier how you'll see the frame of it is there in terms of the isobars. You still have a low out here, but there's very little in the way of precip around it, and it's just basically what is there winds up getting absorbed by this frontal boundary. The low is up north of International Falls. You've got the long occlusion and cold front coming down. So right in here, you're probably going to get some kind of secondary low at the point of occlusion that develops and moves on out to the northeast. That's why I think you probably are going to see this area. This may be a little bit underdone by the models. And the rain does indeed expand a bit as it moves east into New England, particularly up into Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine when it lifts up to the north and east. And then from there, it's a dry Wednesday and Thursday. Next cold front arrives with setting up low pressure coming out of the Gulf states and maybe bringing some rain here along about Friday night and next Saturday. So again, active, I think is the key word here with regards to the overall pattern. Watches and warnings tonight, just to give you a flavor of what's happening with the frost advisories and some freeze warnings up, some widespread frost tonight because of the winds dropping off, the dead calm and clear skies, and the cool air that's overhead. Certainly setting up for some solid radiational cooling conditions with frosts down in through much of northern and northwestern Virginia, also into West Virginia, much of east and southeast Pennsylvania, a good chunk of New Jersey, southern New England, and in the Hudson Valley east of the Hudson River. It doesn't mean that the areas that aren't with frost advisories are going to get below 32. It's that they've already had their first frost. A lot of areas have. And we're also seeing first frosts for the areas in and around Lake Ontario, down through southwestern New York, and a good chunk of the state of Ohio is either under a frost advisory or a freeze warning. You see the tropical storm warnings that are up for the Gulf Coast. And again, I think the main concentration here is going to be right around the Florida Panhandle, particularly from Panama City east. There's not going to be a whole lot happening west of the center. When we looked at the satellite, you noticed that where the center of circulation is, everything was to the east and to the northeast. So there really isn't going to be much going on west of the center as it moves inland. Elsewhere, we've got some various wind advisories and high wind warnings that are up for parts of Wyoming and Nebraska, and also in northern Montana. A smattering of winter weather advisories and a few winter storm watches up in the northern Rockies. Winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings up for the northern Rockies, and a couple of winter storm watches for a few counties there in south central Wyoming. Also some winter storm watches in a little narrow area, probably some higher elevation terrain in Oregon and on up in through western Washington state. A few red flag warnings in Nevada because of dry conditions, and also some wind advisories there and the potential for some fire risk, and the same holds for southeastern Colorado. So I think that pretty much, you know what, let's go back. Let's do a couple of other things here while I got the maps up. And being that this is a Friday night, so let's take a look for snow lovers where we're going for snow over the next 16 days. And again, I would just view this. I'm not focusing here on specific numbers, but rather the total snowfall that the models are generating across North America. And it certainly does seem as if Canada is building up a sizable snow cover here over the next 2 weeks, from west to eastern Canada and also down through parts of the Rockies. So snow cover growth over North America it looks like it's going to be moving at a rather steady and somewhat robust pace. Now, with regards to Siberian snow growth, I don't have any new specific charts. I want to wait till after the 20th, so sometime early next week, we'll see if we can get a chart up showing what the growth has been like over the last 10 days. There has been a stalling of snow cover growth there recently. There's been ample snow cover in the west, not so much in the east. It does look to pick up a bit as we head through the last 10 or excuse me, the last 2 weeks of the month of October. And by the way, showing you how time moves along on the GFS tonight, day 16 is November the 3rd. So we're already into a new month on the long range and getting closer and closer. Before you know it, folks, it's going to be December around here, and we'll be singing Christmas carols and doing Christmas shopping and all the rest of it. So I think as far as Nestor is concerned, it's not impossible that Nestor could get a little bit stronger before it makes landfall. They did actually, on one of the recons earlier today, the Hurricane Center mentioned it in their discussion, that they had winds that were running up to 72 knots that were reported by the reconnaissance aircraft. But on the recent recon, I saw some 55 and 60 knot winds, but nothing. I wouldn't be shocked if you wind up seeing it getting just a little bit stronger. I'm just going to see if there's a plane on the way there. There actually is one just left, so we probably won't be able to see very much from the standpoint of the of new observations. The old one, pretty much shows how broad the center is. It was just kind of hard to find a solid low-level circulation. It was there. The lowest pressure that it found was 999 millibars, and again, I did see a couple of wind barbs of 50 to 55 and 55 to 60 knots. So let me come back over to the board here. As it's always good to see a nice crowd on a Friday night. Steve LaPointe wants to get me a beer and a cigar tonight. I really appreciate it. And you're having a beer, so cheers to you. And after work, I think there's a little after work get together. If I can go, I might just do that. Otherwise, I'll pick up a cigar for the drive home. But thanks very much for hitting Super Chat tonight. Really do appreciate it. You're a long way away, Daniel Fitzsimmons, from average highs in the 40s. You got to get into December first. Patricia Owens loves Christmas, and that's always good to hear, as do I. Although I always describe the period from Halloween to Christmas Day, to me, it's just one long day. It's as if the last 2 months of the year is this black hole that there's no concept of time. It just sort of moves so quickly. You just you basically wake up on November 1st and you go to sleep Christmas night. It just goes so quickly, and they always try to make sure you take the time to enjoy that whole stretch of time, because the busyness of it all, you do get caught up with it, and the next thing you know, it's gone, and suddenly you're into the new year, and you're into the January and February doldrums, what some people would describe as probably the longest 2 months of the year, because we are in the dead of winter. Erica Baker on tonight. Nice to see you. Chuck, you had Cardillo, a bit of a dismal day up in the Catskills because you still were locked in to quite a bit of cloud cover up there. But you're going to get a break tomorrow. You should have a nice day on Saturday, as will much of the Northeast down into the northern parts of the Mid-Atlantic states. This time of year, Patricia Owens, this is the fall. The autumn to me is the nicest time of year. The color, the really beautiful sunsets that you get because of the low sun angle. If you're lucky enough to have a clear sky and a clear sunset, this is a gorgeous time of the year. You're not dealing with that horrible oppressive humidity of the summertime anymore. You can sit outside, a bit of a sweater. You have a fire pit. You get a little fire going. It's just wonderful. It's hard to, you don't have too many days to do that before the winter sets in. So I'm glad to see that you're enjoying it. And yes, very beautiful and picturesque that it is in the Poconos. Anthony Orr pointing out that if this is the last Atlantic tropical storm for the season, it will be above average all the way around, above average in named storms. We're at 14 now. 2 Category 5 hurricanes this season in the Atlantic. What was the other one? I'm losing my head here. So we had, Dorian, obviously, but what was the other Cat 5? Why am I having a blank on this? Anyway, help me, Anthony, okay? Before I look like a bigger fool. Oh, hey, Howard, thanks for hitting Super Chat tonight. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Makes me, now I can get a more expensive cigar. Thank you so much. What was the second Category 5 hurricane this year? I'm losing my mind. I recall talking about the fact that no season has had 3, and the subject of 2 being out there has come up. But I am really racking my brain as to which one was the second one. Oh, well. David Schwartz says, Joe Rayo been ramping up on his knowledge of making videos so he can join me on the Patreon world. David, Joe right now is been sadly recovering from a very bad head cold. And unfortunately, he's had to work all week through that head cold. But I think when I see him next week, I will have that conversation with him, and hopefully he will take the plunge. He's not. I find that folks that are around my age, sometimes they're not, and I'm the same way. You are only willing to accept a certain level of technology, and you just don't want to learn anymore. So he's kind of at that place where he doesn't. You have to learn all this new stuff. But I am going to be a kind person and try to encourage him as much as I can. And if you haven't, go to his YouTube channel, is Joe Rayo Weather, and subscribe to his YouTube channel so that when he does put up videos, you can certainly participate in them and see them. Chris Alley, nice to see you on board on this Friday night. I hope everybody's got at least something to do this weekend with. Outside of just raking leaves. And by the way, one of the things I have noticed this year, being that it's the 18th of October, over the last several years, and maybe even a little bit more than that, I've just sort of gotten used to the fact that the leaves on Long Island, the color change doesn't happen until the first week to 10 days of November. And usually when it does, it happens so quickly that you hardly have any real time to enjoy it. But I have noticed that the color change has started much earlier than it has been over the last 5 or 6 years, and that may be because we've had a number of cool nights since late September. Aside from those, the couple of really hot days that we had that were thrown in, but we've had a number of cool, chilly nights, and I think that's really helped things along. Scott Briller, the chairman, is on, and his mom is feeling better, which we're all happy about. In my 40 years, what was the most frustrating, difficult snowstorm to predict? I think they were all frustrating, and they're all difficult. The smaller ones sometimes can be worse than the bigger ones, because you don't. You oftentimes wind up expending more energy trying to figure out a 1 to 2 inch snow than you wind up figuring out a 6 to 12 or a 12 or more. I would say I'd have to probably. That's a tough one. They were all that way. They were all frustrating for different reasons, and probably the ones where you have to contend with a rain snow line that's coming at you and trying to figure out whether it's going to get to you or past you, or does it get to you sooner or does it get to you later, because all of that impacts snow amounts. I would probably put the Snowmageddon snow of Long Island in 2013 on that list. The famous half blizzard of February of 15 was very frustrating because the 1 foot snow line basically cut New York City in half. And if you went 5 miles on one side into the Jersey side, you barely saw a flake, and the moon was out under a clear sky. While I got 2 feet, I'm 40 miles east. I'm actually about 47 miles east of New York City, and I had every bit of 2 feet of snow on the ground. So for those 50 miles, you went from a coating to 2 feet. And when you get those kind of storms where you're trying to you're forecasting that zone, how do you correctly pick where the western edge is going to be, and where the 1 foot and the 2 foot plus line is going to be? It's almost impossible to do. The January 16 blizzard was like that from the northern end of it, because if you were up near Route 84, you could literally walk from a foot to an inch. Was just a handful of miles, where you would go from bare grass to a foot of snow. So it's when you get those kind of storms are probably the ones that are the most difficult and the most frustrating, because you're trying to pinpoint a back edge and a 1 foot line, and 20 miles, 15 miles, 10 miles. If you live inside those 10 miles and the forecast doesn't come out right, you're going to be upset, and that's just the way it is. All right, so you know what? I think that pretty much wraps it up nicely on a Friday night, and it's always nice to see a nice crowd on a Friday night, because you can certainly have a ton of things to do of fun, going to, or if anybody goes to the movies anymore. I know I certainly don't, or rarely do. But whatever it is, if you've got some plans, go right ahead with them and enjoy yourself. And thanks, Scott, for the... that's very kind. Thank you very much. I appreciate your kind words. Don't forget, if you're new, subscribe to my YouTube channel by hitting the subscribe button. It's absolutely free. And also absolutely free is the meteorologist Joe Chaffee weather app, which you can download on Google Play or on Android. The Angry Ben weather app, the Angry Weatherman, download that as well for your Android device. Not yet available on iPhones, but hopefully in the next couple of weeks it will be. And for those of you who want a more solid weather experience, to continue the experience that you're having here, because a number of my folks that are on the chat board tonight are members of my platform on Patreon, patreon.com/meteorologist Joe Chaffee. That's my subscription platform. $2 a month is all it takes. It helps to support all this stuff that I'm doing, and it keeps me going. And I really appreciate those that have joined up. We've got 240 and counting, which is nice. And for those of you who use weather for your day-to-day decision making, there are some higher tiers available for those that need some extra hand holding. You can message me anytime. You certainly can, if you need something that requires a little more fine-tuning expertise, you might want to look at some of those higher tiers. All right, so we'll just leave it at that. I think my weekend plans are, well, I'm not sure. Okay, I guess if Nestor is around, I probably will. Let's do this. If I don't do a live stream, I'll do an extra video tomorrow. That'll be short. Maybe I'll do an extra Weather in 5 tomorrow afternoon or evening to update the situation with regards to whatever's going on. And probably a better chance of a live stream on Sunday night. It's been a busy week, and I can kind of use a breather. So with the absence of a major storm around, I might take a bit of a break and throw on an extra video. So just look for that, and enjoy yourselves. Have a great weekend. Thanks again to Steve LaPointe and Howard Vanderhoff for hitting Super Chat tonight. Always appreciated. And we will see you at some point over the weekend. Good night.